now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today we're here to talk about tactical tweaks for Arsenal in the 25-26 season following the new additions made. I'm here with a very, very special guest. His name is Pythagoras in Boots. How are you doing, mate? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me on board, Adam. Yeah, so in terms of my background, obviously I worked at West Brom for 7 years. Then I went into law, started on my own YouTube channel, which then grew quite exponentially. And then from there, started getting into contact with professional footballers again, started doing performance analysis. Then they twigged onto the fact that I was a lawyer. So I started doing contract reviews, contract negotiations. Then I thought, might as well become a football agent myself. And then this year had my first sort of appearance on the BBC and got my own BBC show called The Last Pundit Standing, which I'm part of at the moment.
Very nice and very, very varied. Many talents on show. But we are here to talk about Arsenal's attack. How do we fix it? How do we address the issues that happened last season? There's been a clear desire to do so in the window. And we're going to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Arsenal didn't score enough goals last season. Kai Havertz was Arsenal's top scorer with just 9 league goals. Kai finished the season with a total of 15. However, he did miss 3.5 months with injury. Saka missed 3.5 months with injury. Jesus missed around 7 all in. And Martinelli missed a couple, as did Mikel Merino. But in total, Arsenal just lacked firepower. I think that's fair to say. That's not being grossly kind of exaggerating the situation. Arsenal lacked firepower. What are your thoughts on this season? Because we will have these players back, hopefully, for the season. We have made some additions as well.
I think obviously we're still waiting for that one big addition of a centre forward. And I think that will, the whole saga of whether you sign Seshko, you sign Gyokeres, or whoever does come through the door, I think it says it all, doesn't it? Even Arsenal Football Club have now acknowledged the fact that there was that elephant in the room and they're trying to address it. And that signing could be the game changer.
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about our 11 last season. It was static. It was stale at times, and we lacked real kind of dynamism in our attack. You very kindly put together this graphic before the show, and it is kind of a visualization of how we built up last year. We were very much that front five. You can see Mikel Merino, he was playing a false 9 role. He never truly played as a 9. But talk us through this a little bit.
There's a lot of structural issues if you look at this team. So Martinelli, Saka, they're isolated as wingers. And in reality, what would happen is, let's just say they're facing a low block, it becomes 2v1. So it's not just a 1v1 battle against a fullback. Then you've got fullbacks who don't really overlap. So they're not taking any players away. They're not acting as a decoy. So someone like Timber isn't really a naturally overlapping fullback. Lewis Skelly, someone that was being instructed to invert into midfield. So you're getting more and more control of games, but it's not really giving those wingers any freedom to cut inside. And then if you've got a lack of a striker, you need the goals to come from your wide players. And we mentioned the fact that there's injuries involved, but let's be real. I don't think Saka is the type of player really that has shown since history, that he's going to outscore, say, a Mo Salah or a Cristiano Ronaldo type of player. Martinelli isn't going to be scoring 30 goals a season either. So there's not enough goals coming from your wingers. And then you haven't got a central profile who's going to score goals. Then someone like Odegaard's been a bit sort of goal shy in the previous season as well. And then Rice, for all his exploits in terms of the Champions League with that wonderful free kick, he doesn't really score, more than 15 goals a season. He's no Lampard, Gerrard type of profile either. So that entire front five just feels very goal shy. And the statistics also back that up.
Yeah, well, that's something that we are hoping to address. And first off, I wanted to have a look at Martin Odegaard. He's someone that ranks incredibly highly for through balls. So in terms of chance creation with passes and through ball frequency, they're both very high. And he sits up there amongst the best in Europe. However, he's not a Bruno Fernandes type. He's not a Kevin De Bruyne type. Odegaard's a player that likes volume. He doesn't just kind of take loads of chances in his release. He doesn't fling the ball into the box. So that's something that you look at a player like Odegaard and you always think he's going to take that extra touch. De Bruyne, for example, gets the ball. He's not scared to just hit it first time. Bruno Fernandes is exactly the same. Odegaard likes that link up, the multi-touch approach, but he also doesn't have runners. So what we're going to see this year at Arsenal is something very different. And you look at Saka, who you mentioned. I've always seen Saka as more of a creative winger who scores a good amount of goals rather than a Mo Salah, who's essentially a wide forward who just scores loads of goals, equally gets loads of assists as well. But Saka's numbers are very, very high where he ranks. And you look at him in tight spaces, he's very, very effective. But ultimately, what Arsenal are looking at is bringing in runners. You look at the first signing that's announced in attack, it's Noni Madueke, who's a player who's very, very good on transition. I've just mentioned Odegaard's through balls, and he hasn't had runners to work with for quite some time, with the exception of Martinelli, who's been badly out of form. Talk to me about Madueke, because, again, you've put this graphic together, and it's an example of how Madueke could be used on the left. And this feels very Rafinha-esque.
So yeah, well, Rafinha is the right profile to compare to here. Now, the only difference here is I'd say Martinelli is more vertical than a Madueke, in that he will make more runs in behind. The difference is the effectiveness of having made that run. We see quite often with Martinelli that when he does get in behind, he's then trying to almost work his run into getting it onto his right foot. By the time he's done that, it's caused a bit of a delay. He's then getting pressure from the recovering defenders, or he's got himself into an awkward angle where he doesn't quite put that finish away because he's so focused on trying to get side on so he can play that finesse finish. Whereas a Madueke on his left foot, if that through ball is played through, he's going to take the most direct route to goal. He's going to receive it on his back foot, drive into a straight line towards the goalkeeper, and because it's on his left foot, his natural foot, he's going to have a range of options in terms of how he's going to finish it. And we saw Barcelona use that so effectively with Rafinha, where all the build-up is down the right side, and then wait for the perfect moment to then play into Rafinha, who takes it into his stride, one touch, and then the second touch is the shot, and he's put it away. So the speed of attack there becomes much, much more efficient when you've got a natural left-footed player down that left side.
Do you see similarities with how City use Leroy Sané as well, kind of in that Centurion season?
100%. Yeah, I do see that. What I would say is that I think Sané down the left is more effective than Madueke down the left. I do think Madueke overall is a much better player down the right side than he is the left. So there is slight concerns there, I'd say, because Chelsea fans have seen Madueke also used on the left when they tried to play Neto and Madueke at the same time. And what I would say is that Madueke wasn't terribly effective. So whilst this could work in theory, he's going to have to prove it on the pitch as well.
Yeah, well, in terms of effectiveness, the kind of most effective part of Madueke's game is carries. That's something that I think Arsenal have lacked. It's been highly exposed when we've played against mid-blocks because we haven't had that running power to take us through. But where do you see Madueke either as a backup for Saka or an option off the left, adding something to Arsenal that we haven't had before? And how does it improve us both tactically and just unpredictably?
So Madueke is a 1v1 specialist. He's someone who is super unpredictable in the way that he dribbles. So he's a proper maverick in the way that he dribbles. He's just as comfortable cutting inside as he is going around the outside as well. He's got a good weak foot as well. So in terms of as a backup to Saka, there's no better backup that you could potentially find in terms of he's a London boy. He's young, he's physically very dominant type of player, so he's a good backup to Saka. And how it improves you is that we saw Saka being overplayed and breaking down physically. So just to have a backup there already puts Arsenal in a much better place than they were last season. Moving on to the left side, like I said, there's question marks as to how effective he is down that left, but it does give you a new tactical option, because let's just say Lewis Skelly is cutting inside the pitch. You need someone that's going to hold the width in some area of the pitch. So if Saka's still cutting in, so there's no width down that side, a natural width. But if you've got a left-footed player down the left side who is going to hug that touchline, it stretches that pitch and it creates more space for others to work in. So it gives you a new tactical option as well.
Yeah, well, interestingly, you talk about Madueke on the right, how strong he is. And you mentioned he can go either left or right. He's not as bothered as some players, but this is an example of him carrying the ball. You can see he's not scared. He goes inside, sees four players, and he thinks, no, I'm going to go onto my right foot. And he gets the ball across. He finds a way. And one of the things I always think of Madueke is he's not the most polished player in the sense that he can be very smooth to watch sometimes, but there's an unconventional quality of, I'm going to get the ball into the area it needs to go. I'm going to find myself there. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it in that kind of maverick sense. Why do you think it's taken so long for Arsenal to add a player who's got those qualities? Because everyone that we've got right now is very kind of like, it goes back to that control you mentioned. We've a lot of ball to feet players, we've a lot of sensible players, but we don't have someone that's really willing to just go and take that risk. And like, this is quite a distance to carry the ball. Aside from Saka, Arsenal don't have loads of them.
I think obviously it comes back to Arteta's personality. He's not someone that really wants to gamble so much on the pitch. He's the complete opposite to, say, Sir Alex Ferguson in terms of he's very positional. Everything needs to be very meticulous. So if something feels a bit unorthodox and something he doesn't feel like he's got control over, it makes him feel uneasy. So obviously he's probably had to confront that this summer. He's had to accept that, over control isn't necessarily the key to success. So sometimes you have to throw the dice a little bit. And I think this is possibly a sign that Arteta's approach is evolving. So it could be a good thing.
Yeah, and I mentioned the carrying qualities. You look at the most carries in the Premier League. These stats are per 90. Madueke had 6.1 carries per 90 in the Premier League, which is a pretty insane number, the most in the Premier League. And again, Arsenal don't have players, aside from Declan Rice, who are prepared to carry the ball long distances. Martinelli will, but he's more of a player that likes to run into space as opposed to run through players. Saka is a player that likes to link up, and he uses his brain a lot more than kind of his running power or his physical assets. But I do think that this is an area that we are starting to see Mikel Arteta change. And an example of Madueke as well is, I mentioned Saka's brain. With Madueke, this one, he's gone on his right foot. In this instance, he ends up getting the ball across into a very effective area, but he had that runner to pass to. Arteta's probably going to be pulling his hair out at this, thinking that's the pass that you play. Whilst you said that he is addressing some of his demons, how do you think he's going to find watching Madueke on the touchline? Because as you said, this is something he's going to have to come to terms with in a different way that he's had to before.
I think there will be moments of frustration, but at the same time, that unpredictability that Madueke brings to his decision-making can also be a benefit if looked at in the right way, because let's just say you've got a winger there who always plays the right pass at the right time. The opposition can almost predict where that player's pass is coming from. Whereas a Madueke, if you can't really tell what he's going to do next, yes, that can also be frustrating for his manager and his teammates because they don't know what's going to come next. But on the flip side, it does create that unpredictability, it creates that chaos. And against deep set defenses, that can almost be a trump card. So that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I'm really excited to see this season. And alongside Madueke, we are looking at one of the most kind of dynamic, direct centre forwards in world football. It's a deal that we are hoping to have wrapped up very soon. It's likely that we won't have any official announcement for some time, but Viktor Gyokeres is a player that, again, I wouldn't describe as an Arteta type player. He's relatively one-dimensional, and he wants to find the fastest route to goal. And if you look at this graphic showing runs in behind per match, this is a player that just wants to really bomb his way straight through to goal. How do you think having that kind of profile right through the middle will aid the likes of Odegaard with those through balls and give Arsenal that sense of unpredictability that we've lacked?
I think when we talk about Odegaard, I think he's got such a great rate of pass, but he's had no one that really can run onto his passes. I think what we need to see from Arteta, if we're going to bring in a Gyokeres type of profile, is almost an acceptance that in some games, it's almost better off to not have the ball as much, because what you do then is you can almost give the ball away on purpose, bait the opposition to then come onto you, and then you have a lot of space to work with. And then if you played it to an Odegaard who then plays the ball through for a Gyokeres with his running power to then run onto it, I think that could be a real route to go for Arsenal. So I think it varies your approach to the game if done correctly, because instead of just dominating territory all the time, if you can give up that territory at times, but it'll make you a more dangerous team. So I think that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing potentially happen for Arsenal.
Yeah, well, interestingly, you mentioned that this is an example of Sporting winning the ball back around the halfway line. It's actually Benjamin Sesko that loses this ball, and Viktor Gyokeres goes in and scores very quickly. So you can see where Sporting win the ball back. Holman wins the ball very, very quick through the middle. And you look at Arsenal, we've got players like Declan Rice that will occupy the zone that Holman has just won the ball in. And that very, very quick release. Zubimendi's very good at releasing the ball quickly, but it's very quick. There's no messing around here. It's one touch, two touch, bang, in the back of the goal. Do you think there's going to be a sense that Arsenal need to increase the overall efficiency? Because for me, it hasn't just been an efficiency in the final third, but also at the base with Zubimendi coming in. Arsenal's base last season, we could have 4 touches before playing it sideways. Zubimendi, if he's going sideways, gives it first time. He's also happy to go over the top. And similarly, if he's going into Odegaard, you would expect that ball to come into him quicker, which gives Odegaard time to set, or a player like Ethan Nwaneri. But ultimately, someone like Viktor Gyokeres is going to want to go through on goal. How big of an impact is that for central defenders in knowing that they've got that presence in front of them or between them?
I think what we're talking about here is that the speed of play of Arsenal should increase going into next season if we're going to exploit these players correctly. So to get the best out of Zubimendi, to get the best out of Gyokeres, get the best out of Madueke, the speed and tempo of Arsenal's football needs to improve. And if that happens, then you can just imagine central defenders who were previously accustomed to having time on their hands for Arsenal to build up play and then they can slowly drop back as a team. Now they're going to have their wits about them because they might find themselves higher up the pitch than they were accustomed to because Arsenal probably given away the ball a bit more. So they're higher up the pitch now because their team's on the ball. And suddenly Arsenal have baited them into doing that. Bang, bang, bang. Gyokeres is running in behind. And now they've got a really explosive physical forward now that they need to keep a hold of because if they go too high up the pitch, he's going to run in behind them. So I think that aspect could definitely be different for teams to face next season.
Yeah, and talk us through this graphic that you've put together on about Gyokeres specifically in transition moments.
So Gyokeres, obviously, he's such a vertical type of centre forward. He's great at running into channels. He's someone that if he can get on the last shoulder, once he's running through it, it's super, super hard to catch him up because not only is he quick, but he's also got a good, strong build about him as well. So if he does manage to get that yard in front of you, if you try and then hold onto and try and pull him back, he's just going to bustle past you and then run through and goal. The other important thing is that, let's just say, Havertz was in that situation. Havertz has at times shown this capacity that he's got the running power to get in behind. But what Havertz lacks is that picture in his mind as to, yes, I'm running through on goal, but where do I actually want to put the ball into while I'm running? And what finish do I want to use? He doesn't have that picture inbuilt in his mind that a natural centre forward does. Someone like Gyokeres, he lives for that moment. So once he's through on goal, he's already got a picture in his mind as to how this is going to finish. So that gives him clarity of mind when he's running through on goal. So that's also going to lead to more goals for him in this type of situation than it would for Havertz.
Yeah, and this is an example of pretty much exactly what you've just said. Gets the ball on the halfway line, and that ball's in the top corner. It's very, very direct. You can see he's behind the last man as that ball's played, and he's straight through. You mentioned how difficult he is to catch. But one of the things I think is being really overlooked is the quality of his finishes as well. There are so many that he has one touch finish or hit first time. There are others that he takes too many touches. But I hope, given that he's going to be training with 2 absolutely top-notch centre backs, some of those issues will be ironed out. We don't expect the numbers that he's hit last year. But this kind of running is something Arsenal haven't had under Mikel Arteta. The closest we've probably ever had to this is Aubameyang, who was a very different type of speed merchant, and he didn't have the strength that Gyokeres had. He was just an incredible kind of 1v1 finisher or a poacher. But as I said, a very, very different skill set. And you look at Gyokeres' numbers here, where he likes to play. It's very direct. It's very through the middle. But he does rank highly for things like dribbles, 6.41 dribbles per game, 3.53, and dribbles in the final third, 5.59. kind of tying this in with Madueke, do you think a striker playing in that central position who wants to dribble will also create that bit of chaos in there that Arsenal haven't had?
It's all about sucking players in, because if you try and mark Gyokeres one-on-one, because of that dribbling ability, it's really dangerous if you're exposing your defense in that manner where you're almost leaving him one-on-one, because he's got that two-footed ability, Gyokeres, and he's got a really nasty body shift. When he feints, he can really open up those little moments to then get the shot off, and he's very clinical in his shooting as well. So again, if say Madueke can't be handled one-on-one, then you've got a Gyokeres who can't be handled one-on-one, then you've got a Saka who can't be handled one-on-one. Suddenly teams are then having to think, well, who the hell are we going to stop first? Who's our priority? And it really opens up these spaces for these players, to exploit. And Madueke and Gyokeres are very direct type of players. They're match winner type of players. So you're introducing a bit of personality here into the Arsenal attack. And we spoke about in our previous podcast about putting players in this Arsenal team that have a willingness to win matches. I think getting that psychological edge in your front five is really, really important. You don't want just everyone just to think, well, Saka's going to get us out of this, or you want everyone to take responsibility. And I think Gyokeres is the type of player who will take responsibility for goal scoring. I think Madueke, for all these flaws that people talk about, he's someone that is a very direct player, and he's someone who's very, very expressive. He's not a shy type of player. So you're bringing in big type of characters now into this front five.
Yeah, well, both Madueke and Gyokeres are tall, strong, physical players. Madueke uses his physicality very well in the use of his arms. He gets his leg across players very effectively to protect the ball and allow him to really ride that contact. By contrast, Gyokeres has been criticized for his use of his arms, how frequently he likes to spin his man as opposed to holding the ball up. However, some of his hold-up plays overlooked, particularly how often he pops it off first time and finds a teammate. But how do you rate him with that use of his arms to hold off players? Is that a concern given that the defenders are bigger and stronger in the Premier League?
I think it's not a strength of his, let's be real. Do I think it's as worse as someone like Højlund? No. I think he's definitely more efficient in terms of the way he pops off the ball, like you mentioned. But the fact that he's physically not dominating plays in the Portuguese league with his hold-up play does raise concerns as to what he would be like in an Arsenal shirt in that sense. Having said that, I'd say one of the issues Højlund has had coming to United is that we're not a team that's very comfortable in terms of how we build the ball up from back to front. And he often finds himself isolated, having to receive these very difficult balls in channels up against centre-backs. And he's isolated. So then he finds himself in a duel that he just can't win. Whereas with Arsenal, you're so comfortable building that ball up from back to front. You're almost hoping Gyokeres doesn't have to find himself in many situations where he's dueling for the ball. And you're also hoping that he's more smarter, so that if he does pull out wide and gets involved in hold-up play, it's up against a fullback rather than up against a centre-back, because he is a player who likes to drift into wider areas. So I think as long as Arsenal build up in a way where you're not overly exposing him to these dual type situations, it shouldn't be as big of an issue.
Yeah, well, interestingly, on this, you've just talked about him being sucked out wide. One of the things that I've noticed a lot about Gyokeres is how often he's actually left isolated at Sporting. He's a one-man attack at times. And you can see in this instance, another Champions League goal, he gets the ball, spins his man, and I've mentioned before the fastest route to goal. It's diagonal. It's so direct. But Arsenal have a keeper in David Raya who is so quick at collecting the ball from corners, stepping forward 3 or 4 steps and getting that flat, really driven throw down the line. At the minute, Martinelli's the only player that can run in behind, but you're adding a player in Gyokeres who has this kind of quality. And there are a lot of centre-backs in the Premier League and full-backs, and quite often in this position, you will see a holding midfielder being left behind as the big men are up front. This could be an opportunity to exploit. So do you think that given Arteta has focused with Havertz being the almost like a defensive player from corners, Arsenal will start to leave someone up and allow for transition opportunities from set pieces when Raya collects the ball, given Gyokeres' pace?
I think it would be silly not to. I think David Raya is, in my opinion, out of hand, one of the best distributors in world football. So for me, he's got a laser-like kick once he throws that ball up and then he kicks it with that sort of slice kick that he's got. He's got a beautiful distribution. Gyokeres, we just spoke about Martinelli being able to make that run in behind. Gyokeres can give you that run in behind with the finish on top of it. So for me, it absolutely makes sense that you leave him up. Well, the thing with Gyokeres is he's got a good header of the ball when he's inside his own box, so he can be a good defensive outlet. But if you're in a situation where you're already in the lead and you don't want to gamble as much, and you then leave him inside your own box. But generally speaking, yes, I would leave him up front and get him to sort of pull out into wide areas, wait for Arsenal to collect that ball from the cross, and then make that timed run. A bit like what an Edison does with Haaland. I think that's what Arsenal need to do with Raya and Gyokeres.
Yeah, and with Gyokeres, he has got that real difference making in the box that you've mentioned. On this occasion, you look at this graphic, you see box touches per 90. He ranks very, very highly. Arsenal actually have a surprisingly high number of touches in the box. A big part of the problem is we've too many touches that don't go anywhere. But then you look at Gyokeres' touches per shot on target, and where he ranks for both numbers is a very, very healthy position where when you average this out, you look at the box touches per shot on target, he's not far off someone like an Erling Haaland, higher than an Alexander Isak. But then you compare it with Sesko, who's his box touches per shot on target, very, very low. But you look at his total touches, it's very, very low again. So he's actually not having many touches in the box, which is probably why he's not scoring as many goals. Where do you see this fitting in at Arsenal? Because it is going to be a very different league to adapt to.
So the thing with Gyokeres is that his heading ability inside the box isn't great. So in that sense, if you're up against a team which is quite stubborn and you're putting in crosses into the box and it's all aerial type stuff, you're probably better off with Havertz and Marino. But what Gyokeres gives you is that if you can find him with ball to feet inside the box, he's someone that is very good at creating that quick touch to open up space to get a shot off. So he's going to be very efficient in terms of if the ball comes to feet to him inside the box, he will twist and turn on the ball and quickly try and manufacture an angle to get a shot off. So that's the secret to getting the best out of Gyokeres rather than trusting his aerial ability. In terms of aerial ability, I'd say with Gyokeres, if you can get crosses into him and he's managed to get away and create that separation from a centre back, then he's going to be okay. But if you're expecting him to have 2 or 3 men around him and really fighting for that ball as the cross comes in, that's not a strength of Gyokeres.
Yeah, and Madueke is a player that will pair well with some of this as well. He's a player that also likes a lot of touches in the box. He has a lot of carries into the box. He's a disruptor in the final third, that real chaos merchant. And it's showing 96th percentile for successful carries, progressive carries, successful dribbles, 91st percentile. 88th for expected goals and assists. Madueke is a player that just causes a lot of damage in the final third, and it's about tying those actions together. By contrast, we see someone like Viktor Gyokeres is more assured in his decision making, and you put this graphic together about his crossing, and that's something again that I think could be very effective for Arsenal. And you've highlighted Madueke coming in on the left here. Where do you think Arsenal will utilize Gyokeres' creativity? Because right now, that's something that we're not getting a lot of from our 9.
So with this graphic, it's a mixture of trying to highlight what Gyokeres is good at, but also a slight concern from an Arsenal perspective, because if you've got someone like Gyokeres who's very good at pulling out wide and putting crosses into the box, what you need to see then is these 4 midfielders that I've mentioned, they're Madueke, Rice, Odegaard, Saka, they need to be encouraged to get into the box, not just ball watch as he's picked up the ball out wide. They need to make the right runs to make the most of his crossing. And someone like Rice in particular is someone that I'm really looking at because he's got aerial ability as well as this sense of timing in and around the box, and he can ghost into the box. So he's someone I actually really want. If Gyokeres pulls out to the right, he's the guy I want in the box, really heading the ball. Madueke isn't someone that tends to get himself into the box off the ball, if that makes sense, unless he's driving with the ball into the box. But again, this is something that he needs to add to his game and take his game to another level. So if his strikers pull that to the right side and he's playing as the left winger in this particular matchup, he needs to get to the far post and try and get some headed goals on the far post, really up his level in that sense. So yeah. That's what this graphic illustrates.
And interestingly as well, at the beginning of last season, when everyone was fit, Saka and Havertz were interchanging quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah.
And towards the end of the season, when Saka came back, him and Marino were swapping position more often, and Saka was going into that 9 position. So hopefully, if Gyokeres does find himself out wide, we will see Saka going into that area and start to really cause problems. But ultimately, do you think these players offer Arsenal enough, or is there a need to get one more addition in, given that goals haven't been aplenty at Arsenal for a while?
If I was being super fussy, the only thing I would add is an overlapping fullback. Not necessarily as a starter type player, but just someone to give you an extra tactical dimension in certain scenarios. Having said that, if no signing is made, we spoke about the nuclear option, which is, let's just say Madueke is last 15 minutes of the game, you play Madueke out on the right and you play Saka into one of the more central roles next to an Odegaard. I think if I look at that 3-2-5 structure right there, how is that not going to open up a lot of defenses? And I think that was Arsenal's biggest weakness. And I think it's potentially resolved with that type of lineup, because you've got Madueke, Martinelli, both of them almost need to be defended 2v1, not 1-on-1, because it's so dangerous. Then you've got double creators there in Odegaard and Saka, or you could put Nwaneri in for either of the two, feeding in a Gyokeres. And you've got Zubimendi and Rice, who that's a really, really well-balanced double pivot, good on the ball, but also good defensively as well. And you've got back three there that looks really hard to break through. So I think if you're looking at that structure there, last 15 minutes of a game, I think those games where Arsenal tend to get cloggy, where it's 1-1 or whatever it is, they're going to start converting those into more wins. So I can't see how those two additions don't garner Arsenal more points in the league going into next season.
Yeah, and the addition of Zubimendi as well for me is one that can't be overlooked just because he speeds everything up earlier. I completely agree about the overlapping fullback. I cannot wait to see the meltdown if we do sign another left back, for example, but it's a position that I would like to see us actually add someone in. But let's wait and see what happens. Huge thanks for coming on the show. Please drop him a follow at Pythag in Boots. You can find him on YouTube at the same handle. And as I said, massive thank you for coming on. If you've enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, please hit subscribe, and please drop us a comment and tell us what you think of what we've discussed. Have Arsenal done enough? What more do you want to see from us? And have we got the chaos to really break down some horrible low blocks this season? Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and we will see you again very, very soon.